Very good morning to you, and welcome to today's webinar called Labour's New Policies and Property Investment and Everything You Need to Know About the Housing Policies Proposed by our new Labour government. We're going to talk to you for a bit today. It shouldn't last more than an hour. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end. There will also be an opportunity to schedule a quick call with one of our consultants here. We're really looking forward to today. It always amazes me how many people join us on these webinars from all over the world. It's wonderful to be here. We hope you find it useful. And if there's anything you're not happy with, by all means, just drop us a message. If there's any questions you would like us to go through towards the end specifically, just drop us a chat, a message, and we will endeavour to answer those as quickly as we can towards the end. Now, usually what we do right at the beginning here is just run a quick poll. We're interested to know a bit more about you, so you should now see on the top of your screen or on the side of your screen what best describes you. So if you could let us know what best describes you, it's always useful for us to know who we're talking to here. Okay, so let's get started. My name is Sanjit Dhanjal. I'm the Managing Director of the Opulent Group of Companies. And with me today is Mr. Ben Lane, who is one of our senior property consultants here at Opulent. I always find it useful to have Ben on these webinars because Ben talks to our investors on a daily basis. He talks to lots of them and is very much in touch with the investor sentiment and has a good feel for what investors are feeling. So welcome, Ben, to today's webinar.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sanjit, and pleasure to be on. And I know this is a topic that has been on the investors' lips that I've been speaking to recently. So looking forward to talk through it, looking at the opportunities, some of the risk mitigation, and basically what the new government means for the housing market moving forward.
Thank you, Ben. So before we get started, here's a little bit about us. We're an award-winning property investment company based in London. We're trusted by hundreds of investors for over 10 years, and we're very highly rated on Google reviews and Trustpilot. So that's a little bit about us. What's the agenda for today? Well, it's very much going to be about the new incoming government, what their housing policies are, and what that means for you as property investors. We're going to look at, towards the end, some opportunities for investors with the arrival of the new government. We're going to look at how investors can mitigate risk. The first thing I'm going to do is talk a little bit about how their predecessors did, so how the Conservative Party did. We're going to talk to you a little bit about what generally happens to the property market once a general election takes place. And then I'm going to run you briefly through the outline policies. Ben's going to talk to you a little bit more about house building and what the plans are for that from the new government. I'm going to talk to you a bit more about the rental market and what the new policies mean for that. We're going to talk to you about taxation as well, reforming the leasehold system. And then, as I mentioned before, there will be an opportunity for a Q&A session towards the end. So, let us know if there are any questions you've got, and we will do our best to answer them. So moving on to the actual webinar, I'm going to introduce Labour's housing policies. But before I do that, I just want to recap on how the Conservatives did, because, they were in reign for a long time. And there's a lot of mixed feeling about, how Conservatives have done in that time they were in power. I'm of the opinion that they could have done a lot better. And actually, it's been a very turbulent time for property investors in the last kind of 5 years. That has not been helped by things like Brexit, COVID, cost of living crisis. So granted, they have had a pretty difficult job. But let's face it, the prospect of home ownership in this country has never been more distant for so many people. And just to put that into perspective, 20 years ago, a household with a median income here in the UK could pretty much afford an average property. But you fast forward 20 years, and now the same household can only afford 10% of the UK properties. So it's become a lot harder for first-time buyers to purchase property. The number of adults living at home has risen drastically over the last 10 years. It's gone up about 700,000, with a vast majority of 25 to 30-year-olds still living at home. And so the reality is it's become harder for first-time buyers to purchase property. Inflation was running sky high. It's come down a little bit now. And social housing has lagged, essentially. They've done a mediocre job, I would say. Their main policy was the Help to Buy, which was a scheme designed to help first-time buyers get onto the property ladder. And essentially what that involved was the government contributing up to 20% of the initial 25% deposit required to help buyers effectively purchase property. Now, that scheme was meant to last for 3 years and cost the government a total of £3.9 billion. 10 years later, it was still ongoing and ended kind of in 2022. Yeah. But the total cost of that was, it came to about £29 billion. And actually, when you look at the effects of the Help to Buy, it's questionable as to how much help was actually provided. Just from reading some of the stats, I think, 2 out of every 5 properties that were sold through Help to Buy were to people who didn't actually require the help.
Yeah, exactly.
So whether it worked or not is questionable. It was designed to stimulate housing demand in the hope that supply would then follow, but housing supply still remains low, and so it's questionable as to whether their key policy actually worked. So long and short of it is there's a lot of work for the new Labour government to do. So what generally happens, guys, after a new government comes in and we had a general election? Generally speaking, the stability and the new energy that it brings will increase property prices in that year that they were appointed. When there's a hung parliament, prices have traditionally grown around 0.5%, but whenever there's a landslide in a victory, on average, in that following year, prices tend to grow by 7.4%. And already, Ben, I'm sure you will agree with this, but since 2 weeks ago when the Labour government won, we've certainly noticed an increase in sentiment. There's a lot more people ringing us up now, a lot more investors who, off the back of the Labour government being appointed, are all wanting to kind of, dip their toe in the water and buy property again.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. And I think, the good thing that a landslide victory gives is it gives certainty and it gives stability to the market. Because unfortunately, after 14 years of the Conservatives, whilst obviously you would think that Conservatives would be more favourable to property and property investment, I think obviously the mismanagement, especially under the Liz Truss government, that sent it mortgage rates sky high. I think people have been fed up of it and are looking for, kind of new change, new opportunities, and that's what, this result has brought. So
absolutely,
definitely better sentiment moving forward.
Absolutely. And I think tied into that, really, there's a general kind of feeling that Labour and their dedication to social housing, etc., is not necessarily good news for property investors. However, real house price growth in the last 5 decades has risen most under Labour governments, while 4 out of the 5 governments that presided over falling house prices were Conservative. And that really says a lot, doesn't it, Ben?
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. Because, you would think it was, the other way around, and especially as, Labour presided, they were there during the economic crash, like the biggest fall. But actually, this proves that generally house prices do much better under Labour.
Absolutely.
Over the past, 14 years.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's that. Now, what specifically are the housing policies that Labour are proposing? I'm going to just mention them here, but the whole purpose of this webinar is to run through each of these in a bit more detail, so you guys as investors are on top of this you know what's coming down the line, and you can, adapt accordingly. But yeah, it's worth pointing out also that although there has been a lot of discussion about these policies, they're still yet to be implemented and may take some time to do so. But we're going to talk about them anyway, because the sooner you guys know about them, the sooner you can adapt and become more efficient as landlords. But the big one, the biggest one, perhaps slightly ambitious, is Labour need to kickstart the economy and create economic growth. And the way in which they're planning to do that is through increasing the house building. And essentially, they plan to build 1.5 million in 5 years. The Renters Reform Bill, which is now known as the Renters' Rights Bill, as of yesterday in the King's Speech, this is basically a set of policy and bills to be passed around creating more protection and security for tenants. It's caused a lot of upset and a lot of kind of confusion amongst landlords. So we hope to clarify a bit of this now, today, and to show you that actually a lot of these points in the Renters' Rights Bill don't actually or will not have an adverse effect for property investors. We're going to talk about taxation and the proposed changes to taxation, how that's going to affect investors. And then we're going to talk, then we're going to talk about the reforming of the leasehold system, which I think is very positive for investors. So I'm going to now hand over to Ben, who's going to talk to you a bit more about house building and planning reforms.
Thank you very much, Sanjit. So yes, obviously, as kind of Sanjit touched on there, the biggest thing that the new Labour government are looking to do is really drive house building and improve the number of new homes being built. So as you can see from this graph, basically house building has been pretty much under the national target, since 2007, where it got just above the required amount just before then, but has dipped ever since and not really been anywhere near that 300,000 kind of unit target per annum. So when you have a look at kind of how many are being built and where they need to get to, it basically is about a 41% increase from the 212,000 that were built last year. Now, that is very, very ambitious, and if they're actually going to reach that, it is questionable. But they are introducing some really interesting planning reforms that I think will definitely help in the country achieving that. So essentially, the National Planning Policy Framework is very much outdated and is in need of a massive overhaul. So what they're looking to do is basically streamline the planning process to allow new sites and new developments to be built much more quickly and be brought to the market. And this is obviously a process that is going to probably take 2 to 3 years, because naturally developments take a while. But we are going to see the benefits and knock-on effects of this, in the not too distant future. And again, one of the big drivers for Labour, naturally, is looking to provide more social and affordable housing, because the availability of social housing has obviously been in decline since the Thatcher government of the 80s, with the selling off of council houses to kind of private owners. So there's basically a really big opportunity here where you're going to have a government that's much more open and much more interested in taking on properties for social housing moving forward. So there's a really, really big opportunity for investors in the future. So kind of with the planning reform, so what are the kind of big key criteria that, the big sort of policies that Labour are looking to implement? So first of all, it's the freeing up of brownfield sites in the Greenbelt. And in fairness, it's actually a bit unbelievable, really, that this hasn't been done before, because right now in the Greenbelt, if there is, say, a old car park or an old disused building that's within a Greenbelt area, it is incredibly hard to get planning permission to actually redevelop that site.
Just for the benefit of some of our guests here today, do you want to explain what Greenbelt and Brownfield is?
Oh, yeah, of course, absolutely. So the Greenbelt is essentially an area of land around major cities. So you have a dedicated Greenbelt around London, Manchester, Birmingham, Bournemouth and Poole, Liverpool, and kind of a few other of the major cities as well, to basically stop urban sprawl, so basically development getting too too large and impacting too many of the rural areas around these large major conurbations. And brownfield sites are essentially redevelopment sites where there's already been some sort of development on them. So a greenfield site is like a farming field or nature that's going to be redeveloped. But brownfield sites are ones where they've actually had development on them and are basically just being regenerated. And freeing up these ones within the Greenbelt is going to free up 11,000 sites within the London Greenbelt alone, which is aimed to provide around 200,000 new homes. And the reason why that is very important for investors, because we've always had this mantra that buying in the areas that are slightly further out of the city centre, where people can commute into cities, are areas where the prices are lower, but there's always going to be, moving forward, upward pressure on those house prices. And the fact that more homes are being redeveloped there will increase supply, but at the same time, there has been a massive undersupply in those areas anyway, plus it's going to attract new investment to those areas, so we'll have a positive impact on pushing up house prices in and around the commuter belt areas. And another way that they're doing it is through the compulsory purchase compensation rules. So essentially, if there's a large infrastructure project or if there's a development site that already has some landowners on there, essentially going to speed up compensation for those owners to allow the site to become available for development more quickly.
Good.
And then moving on to the next slide. So again, this isn't one that's going to be as relevant, but Labour are looking to implement a kind of larger scale developments as well. So the creation of more new towns, which will actually be a positive for investors because there's going to be more kind of cross-boundary planning collaboration, again, allowing more properties to come to the market and allowing more investment in a number of different areas. And their kind of answer to the Help to Buy scheme is actually introducing freedom to buy for first-time buyers. Now, this is a slightly more comprehensive scheme where it's not just new build property, but will be available for older properties, which again, is beneficial to investors because it means that there'll be more specialised investment properties freed up for investors. Larger properties can potentially be opened up to first-time buyers as well. And the way they're going to do that is by reducing mortgage costs and helping first-time buyers save up for a mortgage. So the way that it looks, this looks like a much more positive, kind of policy to help first-time buyers get on the housing ladder and have a positive impact on the housing market as a whole.
Okay, good. And just a quick question on that, Ben. These are quite ambitious targets that have been set by Labour. And historically, we're all used to the blurb that all these new governments come out with when they're newly appointed. How achievable do you think that is, Ben?
I think 300,000 new homes per year within the first, basically within their first term, is probably not that achievable. Mm-hmm. But seeing that kind of in years 4 and 5 getting close to that figure, I definitely think will become more achievable. And then in their probably second. In their second term, if they do get re-elected, then it would be possible for that. And, these new planning reforms, I think will definitely speed up new developments. Mm-hmm. Plus, Labour would be very, very keen to get more people building, more people buying, because generally when people buy more properties, it obviously helps GDP and natural economic growth.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that, Ben. Okay, so moving on from house building, the next kind of big area for the Tory government who've just left us, and also now the new Labour government, is the rental market. As many of you may know already, the rental market has been growing at approximately 8 or 9% per annum. In London, rents have risen by 15%, and what we started to see is the landlords effectively having a lot of power over the tenants, and the rights of the tenants being almost neglected in some cases. And so the Tory government came up with what was called the Renters Reform Bill. And that included a whole heap of policy. Really all it was designed to do is to increase the protection for the tenants. So I'm going to go through, in particular, what Labour are going to be pushing forward from the Renters Reform Bill, which is now known as the Renters' Rights Bill. Now, the first one, actually, just before I do this, Ben, let me ask you, I know from speaking to some of our larger investors that this has caused a little bit of disruption, a little bit of uncertainty. A lot of people are kind of, looking to maybe sell off some of their properties, etc. What's the general feel been from your investors?
Yeah, exactly. So don't get me wrong. I've had some investors who've kind of looked, at these reforms and are a bit concerned.
Mm-hmm.
But when you actually look at the finer detail of it and what these reforms actually mean, if you are buying high quality properties and you have high quality tenants in there, then it really won't affect you. I mean, what these reforms are really doing is looking to punish slum landlords that don't maintain their properties properly.
Absolutely.
So actually, when you obviously go into it in a bit more detail now, but actually most of these reforms will have a positive impact on the rental market and actually probably protect investors moving forward.
Absolutely,
in some ways.
absolutely. So the big one on this, ladies and gentlemen, is Labour, Conservative and Labour's plans to abolish Section 21. Now, for those of you who don't know, Section 21 allowed us landlords, investors, to be able to evict tenants by giving them 2 months' notice, providing they were at the end of their fixed term tenancy. There didn't need to be a reason for it. We literally could just get rid of tenants, and what was going on is that tenants were being unfairly evicted, and it was causing quite a lot of stress. And so what the government have decided to do is to take away that right from us landlords. We can still evict tenants, of course we can, but there has to be a valid reason. And now any eviction needs to go through the courts. There's going to be legal fees involved, and obviously there's going to be an increased amount of time involved with being able to evict your tenant. There have been some people kind of piping up about this, saying that the legal system here in the UK is not going to be able to cope with the sheer amount of volume of evictions and paperwork and things like that. There is still some kind of uproar about this, but when you strip things down, the only reason you want to get rid of your tenant is because you've picked a bad tenant, basically, or the tenant can't pay the rent, or they're antisocial, they're making noise, and really what this boils down to, if you were to ask me, is working with a reputable management company, which we'll go on to talk about later on. But if you work with a reputable management company, you find good tenants, young professionals, they pay their rents on time, and you're never going to have to. I've been a landlord for a number of years, and I've never had to evict any of my tenants, not once. They all pay their rent on time, and it works quite smoothly. So that's a big one, guys. It's worthwhile keeping abreast of this. Making sure you're kind of one step ahead of it. There will be kind of some reforms made to allow landlords to still be able to evict tenants, and the reasons for that will be enhanced. But the ability for landlords to evict tenants without any reason, it's going to become a thing of the past. The next one is Awaab's Law. Now, for those of you that don't know, this is something that was talked about a lot yesterday in the King's Speech, and the Labour government are looking to drive this forward. And essentially, Awaab Ishaq was a young boy who lived in social housing with his parents. In that house, there was a lot of damp and mold. Yeah. And despite his parents complaining to the landlord regularly, 3 years later, the damp and the mold had still not been put right. And as a result, this poor boy died of a respiratory condition. And so this Awaab's Law was something that's already been rolled out in the social housing industry, and effectively requires landlords to fix health hazards in a prompt manner and in a timely manner. And this now is going to be rolled out from the social housing industry into the private rental sector. This is something that's coming. So be aware of it, guys. Again, most of our investors are buying properties that are new build or, less than 5 years old.
It's still under warranty. So if there are damp issues, then that's covered by the construction warranties and everything like that.
Correct. So if you're looking at buying new properties and you maintain those properties, the likelihood is, you're not going to be penalised by a WARB's law. That's an interesting one. That one, but also again something that's good for tenants. It protects tenants. Here's another one. The government have pledged to allow tenants to challenge unreasonable rent rises. Now, this effectively empowers the tenants to challenge it, and also bans rental bidding wars. For a lot of tenants, they're often involved in these bidding wars. There is a shortage of rental properties here in the UK. And as such, this will allow tenants to challenge that, and to not just be, subject to these, unreasonable rent rises. And I have to stress the term
unreasonable. And obviously, the definition of what unreasonable would mean, is very difficult to lay out. But I think, obviously, if you're looking to put up the rents by 30% year on year, that would probably be unreasonable. Yeah. If it was 3 to 5% in line with inflation and the rental market, then I can't imagine there would be any issues with that. Absolutely. Then we've got the introduction of
rent caps. This is probably the one that I would say is least likely to be approved and to become formal legislation. The reason why is because there's already a shortage of rental properties, and things like this will make landlords sell. They'll just want to get out and sell their properties. It will enhance or exasperate the problem even more. And rental prices will continue to go up. So I don't think this will happen. But essentially what this involves is capping the amount of rent that can be charged in any particular area for any particular property.
Yeah, exactly. Up front, and then
also up front. Yeah, so also up front in terms of tenants who pay up front. Sometimes 6 months, 12 months up front, but then also on the actual pricing itself. The last one here, and this one is going to affect us property investors, particularly those who own properties that are a little bit older. But essentially, the minimum requirement for EPC here in the UK for all rented properties by 2030 needs to be C and above. So anyone who currently has a property that performs poorly on its energy consumption and is maybe a D or an E, then there will be a process to follow to bring that property up to the required level of C. So there may be some work to be done around the heating system,
like cavity wall insulations, like new windows,
things
all
like
that kind of thing.
Things like that. You're still a way away from this being implemented. It has to be done by 2030. But yet again, this is overcome by investors who look for slightly newer properties. Most new properties that we're selling these days are of a B or an A. So again, if you're looking at new build properties or properties that are less than 5 years old, this probably won't apply to you.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, any new build properties by law has to be of a certain EPC rating. So any new builds that are bought within the past 5 years and moving forward, they will meet these criteria.
Correct. So a few other things. There seems to be a big drive on making homes greener by this new Labour government. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but there also will be a lot of initiatives now to developers to build more eco-friendly developments, and so that will be something good for the industry. And previously, under the Conservative government, there was this drive to replace all gas boilers by the year 2030. That's no longer going to happen. So those are the outline changes really to the rental market. How it's going to affect us as investors. I think the long and short of it, though, is if you're a slum landlord or a landlord who doesn't look after their properties, doesn't have very good referencing checks on or vetting checks on the people that come into their properties, then yeah, you're most likely to be affected by this. But if you're on top of that, you work with a reputable management company, the likelihood is this renters' rights bill will not affect you. So that's that. We're now going to talk to you about another biggie, which is taxation. And so Ben's going to talk you through that.
Yeah, thank you, Sanjit. So obviously taxation with the Labour government is probably one of the key areas of interest to investors, because obviously people naturally think that if Labour come in, they're going to be taxed more. So let's have a look at some of the policies that they are already looking to introduce. So the first of all is the changes to stamp duty. So this actually won't affect domestic investors, but it will affect international investors, where they're looking to put an extra 1% sort of surcharge for international investors buying UK property. Now, obviously, for a lot of investors, this is only a small increase, so it won't affect too much, but it might, sort of put off potentially some foreign investors moving forward. Again, this is probably going to take another few years to implement. So, if you do buy now, you're not going to be affected by this, but this is what it's looking like is going to happen moving forward. And then the second change to stamp duty is they're looking to reduce the threshold from 425,000 for stamp duty for first-time buyers to 300,000. So whilst they're obviously introducing the other policy to help first-time buyers, this is one way in which they're kind of taking back, essentially. So again, changes to capital gains tax. So there's been no kind of outline, or there's been no kind of policy saying they're going to change taxation on the actual rental income. But what they're potentially looking to do is change the regime for capital gains, because Conservatives obviously reduced it down to, I believe it's 24% in the last budget. So they're probably going to put it back up to where it was before. And again, there are ways, which you can mitigate this risk, which I'll come on to in more details later. But definitely buying through a business basically mitigates, a lot of that capital gains risk. And then again, this is another one which doesn't really affect a lot of our investors, but will affect a few, which is changes to non-domicile tax regimes. So basically, people who aren't based in the UK but declare their tax here for kind of tax purposes. So basically, the remittance basis for income and capital gains is now going to be removed, and it's going to be replaced with a special status, which can be claimed for the first 4 years of tax residency. However, the changes and the details of that are yet to be implemented, so we don't really know exactly what the finer details on that are at the moment.
Sure.
Anyway, moving on to obviously reforming the leasehold system,
just before we do that, Ben, it's worth pointing out here that, guys, we're not tax advisors. We're not qualified to give tax advice. We're just merely kind of bringing these new points to your attention. But look, for a more detailed analysis on any new changes to the taxation system, we would strongly advise speaking to an accountant, speaking to a tax advisor, just to make sure that you're on top of this and have made the necessary plans to your portfolio to kind of mitigate the amount of tax you're paying.
Absolutely.
So yeah, the other part to the other housing policy that they're going to introduce, which again kind of they are picking up from the Tories, the Conservative government, is to reform the leasehold system. Now, just to kind of put this into perspective, we regularly speak to investors who quite frankly have been caught out by the existing kind of leasehold system. We've got clients who have bought properties where the lease is running out, or you've got less than 80 years left on their lease. Traditionally, it's been very hard to renew leases. It can be quite time consuming, and it costs a lot of money. And so the biggest part of reforming the leasehold system is to make it much easier for leases to be extended, and for people to do that in a more simplified way. This is going to help people who own properties with a lease less than 80 years. That's going to become a lot easier to do. We also have a lot of clients who have purchased properties where there is a ground rent. I know ground rents have been abolished now moving forward, but some of our investors purchased property 5 or 10 years ago where there was this ground rent. And what the reforming of the leasehold system is going to be designed to do is to regulate those ground rents and to see what's been going on. And, we've had stories here of, some investors purchasing property where the ground rent was, £250 per annum.
Yeah, and then doubles every 5 years and things like that. And then
literally would double every 5 years, which means, by the time you get to, 10 years, you've hardly got any income left because, most of what you're paying is on ground rent on a monthly basis. So I think this is a very good change to how things are being done. It's going to be designed to effectively deter house builders from introducing ground rents on their schemes. But also what they're looking to do is police or encourage more developers to steer away from a leasehold type scenario to a common hold scenario, which is effectively where all of the owners on a block will own the entire freehold. If anything goes wrong in the building, collectively they decide on, how best to put that right. At the moment, it's usually done by service charges. And again, another, especially kind of in the last 2 or 3 years with the rise in energy consumption prices, etc. What we've seen is service charges kind of go up a lot for investors. It's happening across the board. And, all of these service charges are usually created or budgeted by the building manager. And, these guys have got their own agendas and things like that. So by having a common hold type scenario, a share of freehold, you as all the owners can collectively decide how you're going to put problems right and do it in the most cost effective way. So I think that again is a good point of this reforming the leasehold system. And I think in general for investors, this is good news, Ben.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. Because don't get me wrong. I think the vast majority of leasehold properties, the service charges are very fair and go towards the running of the building and the costs are right. But this will, moving forward, stop people basically being taken for a ride by unscrupulous developers. I mean, there are, obviously potential issues with share of freehold because obviously you have to get everyone in the building on the same side, which can be challenging. Mm-hmm. But I think overall, it's definitely beneficial.
Absolutely. So that, guys, are pretty much the key points of the Labour manifesto when it comes to housing. There will be other kind of smaller points that will become clear as time progresses. And so, what does this mean for property investors, and how do we as property investors try and mitigate the risk of this? Ben's going to talk to you a bit more about what we could be doing.
Yeah, exactly. Because, as you kind of touched on there, all of this, the Labour government's very, very new and it takes time for legislation and the finer details to come in. So how do you protect yourself against potential issues, especially with the taxation that we touched on previously? So we would say definitely buying the property within a business. Because first of all, it is more tax efficient anyway. Mm-hmm. As we said, definitely speak to a tax advisor. But one of the benefits of buying a property through a business is that when you send money from your personal account to the business, that counts as a business loan. So then basically you can repay yourself through the rent as a loan repayment, which is tax-free anyway. So if they do implement changes in taxation that specifically affects landlords, it can only affect landlords that have bought in their own personal name, not at landlords who have bought through a business. Because to change the taxation landscape for businesses, it has to apply to all small businesses. And I think it's unlikely that Labour would start punishing small businesses through higher taxation. It doesn't seem like the logical thing that they would do.
No.
But anyway, the tax savings that you get through buying through a business anyway would offset if they did increase it anyway. And then again,
just before we move on, Ben, this, buying property through a company has really taken off. Certainly amongst our investors. But for the benefit of our guests here today, can you just run us through the process of creating a business, how long it takes, and typically what are the costs involved, etc.?
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very quick and simple process. So if you wanted to do it yourself, there are companies out there where you can literally go online and register the business, and they do everything for you, and they do all that for you. So companies Made Simple, for example, I think it costs about £200 to set up the business. Then there's a few other documents that you need to fill out. So you're looking at about £250 to set up the business. And then ongoing, you need to do a tax return and accounts each year. So again, you need to pay an accountant for that. That will cost between £300 to £500 depending on the accountant. So again, if you've got a property that's generating you 10,000 worth of income and you're a higher rate taxpayer, rather than paying £4,000 or £4,500 on income tax on that, you'll only be paying for the you're basically paying just for the accounts to be done each year.
Correct.
And there are also companies where they can do the full process for you anyway. So it's very simple and straightforward.
Absolutely. Good.
And then moving on to the next point is buying newer properties. So all of this legislation that's been brought in, especially with EPC increasing the demand for energy efficient properties. Again, if you buy newer, they'll all be up to standard, so you won't be affected with a kind of higher build to retrofit properties to make them more energy efficient later on. Plus, also just generally, when you buy newer properties, you have lower maintenance costs, things are within warranty, and it's a much simpler and more straightforward process anyway. So then moving on to the other risk mitigation strategies. So again, we touched on this with the type of tenants that you'll be using and getting in. If you use a professional management company that does proper vetting and proper due diligence on the tenants that are going to rent in your properties, you're going to not have any issues with, first of all, at-fault evictions, but also with non-fault evictions. If you get young professionals in, they generally rent properties for anywhere between 2 to 3 years, so you have regular chances to change tenants to increase the rents. So again, using a professional management company is absolutely key. And then moving on to the final point is obviously Labour's big drive for capitalising on social housing. Now, we've made quite a big point of this because there's a lot of kind of specialist social housing investments out there offering 10% net returns, guaranteed buybacks. And I think you do have to be a bit careful, because what any investor can do is buy a normal property and go to the local council, and the local council will guarantee the rent directly with them. So there's these other companies that are offering above the average rental value guaranteed returns. So essentially what they're doing is selling the properties at a higher value and then subsidising those rents with buybacks that will probably never be enacted. So there's a big opportunity to invest in social housing with this new Labour government, but the correct way to do it is to just buy a normal property and then rent it directly through the council. I mean, is there anything you wanted to add on that, Sanj?
Look, I mean, there's a lot of this stuff going around at the moment, and we've talked about it in previous webinars, and there's massive promises of 10% net returns and 25-year government-backed contracts, etc. We've looked at this and we've gone through it all, and put bluntly, it's a load of rubbish. These contracts are not with governments; they're with housing associations, which are private. The returns more often than not have been inflated.
Absolutely.
The property prices that are being sold. I'll give an example. I won't mention any names, but we were approached by a developer who was previously selling apartments in his building at £75,000, just regular buy-to-let apartments. He then approached us this year, approximately a year later, and asked us if we wanted to sell a new project of his which was exactly the same project as the one he was selling the year before, but because he had now got this assisted living tenant inside and this 25-year government-backed contract, he essentially was selling the same apartments that he was selling for £70,000 at £145,000 for the exact same apartment. And because you can't get finance for these, they're cash buys. People are falling for it, and it reflects badly on the industry. It makes our life trickier, but essentially, they're just too good to be true. A lot of these things. There is money to be made from from investing in social housing. There is a right way of doing it. Typically, the leases that are government backed are usually 6 or 7 years. And typically the sort of return you would be getting is around 6 or 7%. Definitely not 10%. The 10% comes from, selling an apartment for double the value it's actually worth, and essentially using that to pay off or subsidize a higher rental assurance. So tread carefully with this, guys. There's a lot of this stuff going around, and more often than not, when you go through everything with a fine tooth comb, it doesn't. They don't really stack up. Tread carefully with those. The first point that you mentioned also there was the use of a professional management company.
Yeah.
Now it always amazes me just how many people manage properties themselves, but also they collaborate with tin pot management companies who, quite frankly, aren't on top of the legislation. They're not on top of the compliance. And they won't be considering everything that we've spoken about today. They'll do it reactively. Often it's too late at that point, and investors will be penalised and face penalties, etc. So again, partner up. If you are investing in property, partner up with a reputable management company. Make sure they're on top of all of the new legislation, both current and incoming. You might have to pay 10% of your rent, but to the management company is their fee. But this is going to be money well spent. Most investors are time starved anyway. They have quite demanding jobs to look after. Often have families to look after, so they don't necessarily want to be burdened with things like this. And working with a good management company will really help overcome any of this.
Exactly, or at least, at the very least, work with a reputable management company to tenant the property.
Yeah.
At the very least.
Absolutely.
So obviously that was the talking about risk mitigation. So what are the kind of opportunities that having a new Labour government and these policies will bring moving forward? So the first one is obviously the increased demand and investment within commuter towns and cities. So again, touching on the planning reforms, the fact that a lot of these brownfield sites are going to be opened up will again have a positive impact on investment in population densities in the Greenbelt areas in and around London, Manchester, Birmingham, and other major conurbations. Furthermore, the value of properties owned within a business will increase moving forward. So obviously, when you buy the property from the developer, you will obviously have to pay stamp duty on that and then put it into the business. But moving forward, when you then sell that property on to a new buyer, that new buyer will only have to pay a 0.5% rate of stamp duty, which is called
share purchase acquisition.
Yeah.
And they would pay 0.5%, but they would effectively take over the shares of the company that owns that property, which is why it's important to purchase each property under its own separate company. By taking over the shares of that company, they effectively pay 0.5%. And if you're, someone who's based overseas, and they bring in the extra 1% on the stamp duty, making it a 3% premium for overseas buyers, then this is going to add value to your property and make it a lot more accessible to buy and easier to resell.
Yeah, exactly. So that money that could be spent on stamp duty will mean that you'll be able to command a premium for it. And again, as you mentioned, one property per company is the best way of doing it. So you can sell that individual property at any one time. Otherwise, the benefit of doing it if you had 3 properties, you'd have to sell all 3 at the same time, essentially. So it's best 1 property per company. And then again, as we said, buying new build properties to insure against future EPC legislation. Again, what that means is if you buy new at the moment where it's already at the same level, it means that you'll have an advantage over landlords that have invested in other older properties which have a much lower EPC rating because they might not be able to rent it moving forward. So again, that will give you the advantage over the next 5 to 10 years. And again, buying low and selling high. So as we come on to the next slide, we'll talk a bit more about this, because what Labour are really big on, and there will definitely be elements of this. Whether they do it completely is another question, but investing in previously neglected areas. So again, bringing these sites forward through the planning system to be available to be developed will again put upward pressure on the house prices by bringing in new investment into areas which maybe haven't seen as much investment under the Tory government. The kind of, was it the Northern Powerhouse, which was more kind of lip service rather than actual stringent policies, whereas Labour, they're going to invest in their supporter heartlands, which we can now see happening. Benefits, again, for buying properties which are energy efficient and eco-friendly. But again, this is going to be a big one, which they haven't announced these specific policies on. And there's going to be a big drive on big infrastructure projects to try and level up the north. So again, there's going to be a big opportunity for investors by identifying these areas where they're going to be investing in new infrastructure, which has a positive impact on demand and house prices.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, I've just made it possible for you to be able to book a free one-to-one consultation with us. Hopefully you can see that. If any of you would like to discuss any of this or any of our properties, etc., feel free to arrange a consultation and book one at a time that's convenient for you. So that in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, is today's webinar. I think there's a lot of noise at the moment around this, as one would generally expect when a new government comes in. First 100 days is the most important time for any new government, and so there's a lot of noise about this. A lot of what we discussed is not formal legislation as yet, but may well be in the coming few months, years. But I think the general message for investors is to be aware of all of this, and whilst there may be some short-term challenges, ultimately the UK has always had a lag between supply and demand. We've never built properties at the rate in which we should be building them. Even if Labour were to build 1.5 million houses over the next 5 years, yes, they've met the target for these 5 years. But what about the backlog, the 20, 30 years that they haven't been able to build enough houses and meet the targets? Ultimately, that's what we feel has driven the growth in this country. The demand is simply too much for supply, and I think that that will continue moving forward. There will still be some excellent opportunities for property investors, and still lots of money to be made. So
yeah, exactly, absolutely. And just very much touching on that, I think the supply and demand driving house prices, I think, was definitely shown back in 2023 when obviously mortgage interest rates were high. Prices still went up in many areas of England. They still went up in Scotland. So even with the biggest challenge to the property market since 2007, prices still increased because it's the supply and demand gap that is driving these prices. So to be honest, I mean, a lot of these policies, I think are positive, and I think moving forward, it's a very good time to invest in the UK market. Absolutely. So that kind of wraps up the content of the webinar. I'm just going to explain to you a bit more about Opulent, how we can help, what we're all about. We've pioneered and created what we call the total property investment solution, and effectively what that means is all of this, as well as researching, buying, and managing your product, all of that is effectively outsourced to us, or we will take care of everything. You'll have one point of contact,
throughout the entire process, whether that means researching or buying or reselling. You will have the same point of contact. We can help with furniture, mortgages, all of that sort of thing. So if you're kind of time-starved or maybe from a foreign jurisdiction and don't necessarily understand how things work, then this solution is for you. Here's a quick rundown. This isn't a sales pitch, guys, but here's a quick run through of some of our current opportunities, some of which I know the people today have already purchased in. Some of our attendees I know have already purchased in this property, but this project here in Stafford is a prime example of investing into an area that's commuter belt, where there's money being spent from local government and national government, and prices are very low. You can pick up a property on this particular development for just less than £100,000, for a one-bedroom apartment in a town centre with all of the amenities nearby, up to 10% net short-term on that.
Yeah, and a very good short-term let market, which I can discuss with people in more detail.
Absolutely,
very good.
Absolutely. I mean, Stafford doesn't necessarily spring to mind as a hotbed for short-term rentals, but actually, when you strip it back, there is barely any good quality accommodation hotels in Stafford, and so short-term lets are very good. So that's that one. We're also quite active in and around London. Here's one of our projects not far from where we are now, actually, in Uxbridge, where we've got completed tenanted properties delivering a 5.5% to 6% return on a long-term tenancy, with prices starting from £277,000. We've got one beds on this property, guys, starting at £295,000 now. That's basically cheaper than Manchester, but yet you're 8 minutes walk away from an underground station. You're very close to Heathrow Airport and a short drive away from the new Crossrail that's gone in. So another very good project. We're also active in the PBSA space, which is purpose-built student accommodation. These properties are there's no finance available for these, so they're cash purchases.
But they are much lower.
The prices on here start from as little as 45,000. Actually, we've just taken on a new project, but these are all completed. They're all operational. There's no development risk, and they do come with rental assurances from between 7% and 10%, actually.
And again, with student accommodation, if you're concerned about the reforms in the rental market and no fault evictions and that kind of thing, the student market is basically separate from all that. So again, this mitigates a lot of the issues with rentals.
Yeah, absolutely. And our brand new launch, actually, we launched this a few weeks ago, is a project called The Old Ground in Leicester. Leicester's a very interesting place. I really like Leicester because prices are lower than the national average here. But with all of the plans moving forward, that's not going to be the case for long. Prices are still very affordable. You've got studios starting at 140,000, one beds from 180, and two beds upwards of 260. This particular project was built on the site of the old Leicester City football ground, which was known as Filbert Street, and it's an off-plan project due to complete in May next year. And so, definitely one looking at. It's also exclusive to us here at Opulent. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us. We've had a few questions trickle in, so we'll do our best to answer them. There's also the opportunity there for you to book in a consultation with us, which we can do. But thank you again, and we will now run through some questions. And guys, look, if you've got any questions still, please do drop us a message. Although no one will be able to see it, we will be able to see it, and we'll address them now. The first question that we've received relates to stamp duty, and the question is, if I've purchased a property personally to transfer it into a company, do I have to pay stamp duty again? Do you want to answer that, Ben?
Yeah, exactly. So again, it's best to speak to a specialised tax advisor on this to talk to you about the best way. But yes, you would have to pay, because even if you transferred the property from your own personal name into a business for say £1, the taxman would still deem that you need to pay a fair rate of tax on that property, or a fair valuation.
Yeah.
Isn't that correct?
It is correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah. Long and short, you will have to unfortunately pay it, which is why we're always kind of encouraging people to buy them in the company to begin with. So hopefully that's answered your question, Ellie. Another question here is, do we still have to pay ground rent on new build property?
Yeah, exactly. So if so basically any properties that were completed, so not sold, if you do a bought off plan, but completed from, I think, start of last year, it is illegal for the company to charge ground rent if it's completed from 2003, or even if it was completed before, but it's the first assignment of the lease from the developer. So it's the first sale. So you've seen our Dolphin Bridge House development, for example, because that was completed in 2019 and retained by the developer, they now legally cannot sell that property with ground rent. So essentially, yes, if the property was completed or has been sold by the developer since 2003 or sold by the developer slightly earlier, then no, they're not allowed to charge ground rent. If you bought the property second hand in 2003, where it was built previously and you sold, then yes, you will have to. But the benefit of this new legislation is that the rate that can be increased will be capped, essentially.
Good. Okay. Hopefully that answers your question, James. Another question coming here from Jay. What is the difference between self-managing and using a professional management company with Airbnb style property, so short-term lets, really? So look, anyone thinking of managing a short-term let property themselves really needs to think again, because this isn't like managing a normal long-term rental property. People are coming, they're going. You need to change linen, you need to change toiletries, you need to clean the apartment regularly. There is a hell of a lot to do here. And let's not forget, you need to meet the clients, right? You need to meet and greet the people who are staying in your property. Yes, you can. I mean,
it is possible. It's just that it's very, very time consuming.
It is very
so if you were to do it, so for example, my uncle and my great aunt do it, but they do it in a property that's near to them on the Dorset coast, so they have full control of the process. They're there to do all the cleaning, so they're there 2 to 3 times a week. Doing cleaning, and basically they streamline the process that way. So if you were to self-manage, make sure you're close to the property, otherwise it'll just become a massive headache.
I'd imagine they're probably retired as well, so have a lot of time on their hands.
Oh well, exactly. Yes, they are. So for them, it's not
too bad. But certainly, the difference is that if you manage it yourself, you will save between a 15 and 18% management fee, but then you will need to do all of that work yourself. And look, let's face it, it's not impossible. Like Ben said, you could know a local cleaner who can clean the property as and when required. You could have a secure key box on the side of the property that gives access to the keys for the tenants. But you're welcome, Jay. But I was talking to a colleague of mine who runs a company called My Property Host, and he said one of the biggest things with short-term lets is being able to police that the person who signs the agreement with you or signs the term with you is actually the same person that is actually going into the property. That's a big one. And so working with a professional company will definitely help make sure that it is them. Because what we're starting to see now with Airbnb style properties is there's parties being organised, and there's youngsters going in there and causing damage to properties, etc. So it's important to police that. But yes, the main difference is the fee, really.
On a long term rental, you're looking probably around the 10% mark. for short-term rent, you're looking at 80% of the gross rental income. Obviously, the rental income is much higher. So, you know, it is significantly more, but obviously your net income, you know, would be higher through that. And again, using a professional management company for short-term lets is also important, because there are certain cities where they're actually limiting the number of days that certain properties can be rented for. So again, you know, looking at areas that are maybe not your more traditional sort of Airbnb locations, again, moving forward, maybe more suitable as well.
Good. Well, look, I'm conscious that we're kind of 5 minutes over time. We'd love to sit here all day and talk to you. If there's anything you want to speak to us about specifically, either book the appointment with us to have a consultation, which hopefully you can all see, or give us a call in the office, and we'd be happy to discuss it with you. But we'll be back again next month. If you've got any topics you'd like us to raise on some of these webinars, feel free to email us or contact us and let us know. But from me and Ben, that is a wrap, guys. Thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Pleasure. Thank you very much, guys. Take care.